Hi folks, welcome to the 5th video in our ongoing journey of discovery of Moffatt ancestry. We are continuing our hunt for Mary Moffett. Although Mary and the McIntoshes sounds like a 60s folksy music group that might have appeared on Top of the Pops, but only once. The family tree currently looks like this, and we know that in 1881 Margaret, John, James and Catherine are living in 29 Chapter Street, Jarrow. George and Jane had sadly died, and Isabella is a domestic servant to a family a couple of streets away. We also know that Mary Moffett was the informant on her sister Jane's death certificate in 1879, but she is missing from the 1881 census. However, one possibility is that she married, and a search of the BMD index reveals a marriage between Thomas McIntosh and Mary Moffett on the 7th of February 1880 at the parish church of Jarrow. Mary's residence is recorded as 29 Chapter Street, the same as the census entry for Margaret Moffett, so this is pretty much our Mary. Further, on the marriage certificate we can see her father was George Moffett, a dyer, and one of the witnesses was John Moffett. Although we've seen that George was a shipyard labourer at the end of his life, it's likely that Mary would have remembered when her father was a cotton dyer. So all these pieces of evidence confirm that this is our missing Mary Moffett. And now that we know that Mary Moffett has become Mary McIntosh, we can look for her and her husband Thomas in the 1881 census. They are found living with her in-laws, John and Margaret McIntosh, at 54 Union Street, Jarrow, along with Thomas's 6 siblings, Elizabeth, George, Margaret, John, Alexander and Frederick. Looking at the 1891 census, Thomas and Mary are now living at 1 Scott Street, Jarrow, with their 4 children, Margaret, J, John, Alexander and Thomas, aged 10, 8, 4 and 1 respectively. In the 1901 census, Thomas and Mary are now living at 36 Prince Consort Road, with their 6 children, Margaret, John, Thomas, Isabella, Mary and Christina. So it would seem that Alexander has died. However, there appears to be something wrong. Mary is now recorded as being 27 years old and born in Germany. The second word, which may be a place, doesn't seem to exist in modern Germany. So, what's happened? And we can get an idea, I suppose, by looking at the birth certificates of some of the children born after the 1891 census. So we find Isabella was born on the 20th of December 1891 at 1 Scott Street, Jarrow, and her mother was Mary Moffett. Then we have Mary, who was born on the 30th of June 1894 at the same address, and Mary Moffett was her mother as well. However, Christina was born on the 11th of January 1901 at 36 Prince Consort Road, still in Jarrow, but her mother is Mary Lickner. This implies that either Mary Moffett has divorced Thomas or she has died. A search of the GRO index reveals that in fact she did die on the 22nd of February 1898 at 1 Scott Street, Jarrow, of nephritis pneumonia. So then we can do a search of the BMD index, and that reveals that Thomas married Mary Lackner on the 13th of November 1900 at South Shields Register Office, and Mary's father is Frederick Lackner, who was a sailor. And if we look at the 1911 census, this shows us that Thomas and Mary are now found at 33 Hibernian Road in Jarrow, and they have 3 children, Christina, George and Luna, who are all living with them, and who all must be the children of this Mary. The 1911 census just gives Mary's place of birth as NK, Germany, whereas the 1901 census suggests that she was born in a place called Farnris, although there seems to be no such place. Her father was a sailor, so there is a question of why his daughter should be living in Jarrow in 1900 when she had been born in Germany. This is a mystery that may take some time to solve. Meanwhile, to summarise what we know of 1881, the discoveries so far are these. First of all, Margaret Moffett was living at 29 Chater Street, Jarrow, with her sons John and James and her youngest daughter Catherine. Margaret's husband George had died in 1879. He must have had a hard time in the 1870s, having had to give up his life as a skilled cotton dyer, only to become a shipyard labourer, even though, he was a foreman though. He may have found this transition hard to cope with and so maybe turned to alcohol. On top of this, his daughter Hannah died when still a baby, and with his daughter Jane dying, this perhaps pushed him over the edge, and perhaps in an attempt to give up alcohol, he died himself just 4 days later. Meanwhile, Margaret's eldest daughter, Mary Moffett, married Thomas McIntosh in 1880 and was living with her in-laws in Union Street, Jarrow. Isabella, meanwhile, is a domestic servant in Ormond Street, Jarrow. From this map we can see that all of this took place in rather a small geographical area of Jarrow. But now it's time to pause and update the family tree again. Meanwhile, in the next video, we will look at the 1891 census, because believe it or not, almost everyone has vanished.